This is so cool. I mean, think about this, guys. Free software found the deal, got the buyer to fund earnest money, agreed to pay all these fees, but got those vendors to get paid on the closing statement at closing from the proceeds. Dimitri made $100,000 from Belgium on flipping lots with zero out of pocket, not a dime into the deal.
This video is brought to you by Propwire, the only real estate software with county courthouse leads, including code violations, divorce, bankruptcies, and liens. Check it out now at propwireleads.com.
We have a special guest today, guys, on our call. I want to welcome Dimitri. Thank you, Dimitri, for being here with us. How are you doing?
Hey, nice meeting you, man.
Nice meeting you. Thank you for joining us. Guys, I'm really excited
Sure.
about this interview. Dimitri lives in Belgium, guys, and I'm guessing there's a significant time change. Like what time is it for you right now?
Yeah, it's not bad. It's about 6 hours. So I'm 6 hours ahead of Florida, which is the market where I work in. And it's not too bad. Start working at about noon, which is essentially 6 in the morning in Florida. And then I work until midnight, which is 6 p.m. in Florida. So
Okay.
the time difference is not that bad. It's essentially when people are finished with work, they typically have their free time. I have my free time before work. So, that's
Yeah,
what
so
it
you
is.
just adjust to that.
Yeah.
Are you a native Belgium, or is that where you're from?
Yeah, absolutely. Born and raised in Belgium. I've lived in Belgium for, well, most of my life with some trips to Florida where I stayed for a year in total. And I've traveled a lot, so I've spent probably 2, 3 years outside of Belgium, but I've lived here my entire life. Yeah.
Okay. I feel
Yeah.
somewhat of a connection to Europe. My wife is Canadian, but both her parents are immigrants from the Netherlands. And
Okay.
so they're
Yeah, it's right up
100%
north.
Dutch. Yeah. Yeah,
Right, right.
both her parents are like
Yeah.
100% Dutch. Their parents immigrated to Canada. So we
Okay.
try to get back and visit, Europe a couple times a year. It was fun. We went to the
It's nice.
Netherlands last year and we went and
Hmm.
visited, where her ancestors are from. They basically like centuries of Dutch, and we went to the homes they lived in. We went to the cemeteries. It was just really fun to kind of make that connection.
Which part of Netherlands?
Well, Amsterdam, or no, no, no.
Okay.
What's the capital?
The capital, I believe, is Amsterdam. I'm not
Yeah.
sure. Or Den
Okay. So,
Haag. Or Den
so
Haag. It might be Den Haag. I'm not sure. I should
yeah.
know that,
You
but
know, you know what
yeah,
was
I'm not sure.
crazy about the Netherlands? I think this might be other parts of Europe. They travel so much by bicycle
Oh
that
yeah.
up and down the towns are bicycles are just lined up like on the
Oh
side,
yeah.
and they have to
Yeah.
fish them out of the rivers and lakes because I don't. People must throw them away when they break down and stuff. It's crazy.
Yeah, yeah, we like doing road trips, and I go with the car to Paris, which people tell me I'm crazy to go with my car to Paris, but I do it. I go to Milan, Paris, Monaco. We go to all those places with the car. But Amsterdam is the only place where I won't go because there's just bikes. They literally fly into the door of your car and then just get up and leave, and it's crazy town there with all the bikes. Yeah.
Everybody gets around on bicycles. Yeah, it's nuts.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Dimitri, I've gotten to know you a little bit via the comment section on like my YouTube channel. You participate regularly on Wholesale Hotline that I do with Pace
Sure.
Morby, Jamil, Damji, and Brent
Yeah.
Daniels. And I've just seen
Awesome.
you around. You're so positive. You're so encouraging. You help a lot of people. You do this whole idea we have of like squatting up and
Sure.
networking. And I just want to
Hmm.
first and foremost say thank you for being that positive voice in the community. I appreciate that. Thank you for being active. You seem like you're an
Yeah,
avid learner. You're always trying to learn new things, even though you've been doing this a long time. You
absolutely.
you got started back in I think 2010. I think is when you got started in real estate.
No, yeah, not really. I mean,
Okay.
I was still at university in 2010, but what ended up happening is I studied engineering in Belgium, and I went to like a sort of like an Ivy League place, which was extremely difficult. I remember one course that I had out of 12 courses in a semester was like 1,200 pages, and it took me like a whole day just to read through it one final time. It was super difficult, and everyone told me like you'll make a lot of money after that, and so I remember in my last year, someone came up to me with the starting salaries, and I was so disappointed. I was like, I cannot even buy one decent sports car with this salary, which I've always been a car fanatic as a kid. I always loved cars, just the mechanics and everything about it. And so one of my motivations to study that difficult course in engineering was to get a good salary to buy a decent car. And so I was
Yeah.
like, I have to do something difficult to get a good salary, but then it was just not going to work out. So I started reading books, and then I got into real estate, but I was living in Belgium. And so I did my first deal in 2011, where I read a book by Thomas Lucier called Real Estate Options. I don't know if you know that book. And I went with that book to an attorney in Belgium, and I was like, this is what I want to do. And so I spent like 5,000 euro in 2010 to get like the best contracts. The mistake everyone makes, right? You think you need the best contracts and you need everything the best, whereas you just need like 5 lines saying you're buying it and you can assign the contract.
Yeah, what you really need is a deal. You don't need all that other stuff. You need a deal.
Right. But actually, someone through my family who I knew and whatever, they were selling, and I got a 3-unit apartment building under contract in 2011 for 250,000 euros. And I assigned that contract for, I believe, 270 or 275, which back then was, a good amount of money, especially because a euro dollar was 1.5. So it was about $30,000-$40,000 back then.
And you can do assignments there.
Yeah, you can do assignments, but it's sort of complicated with the taxes, and there's no real estate groups, there's no nothing like that, and so it was sort of difficult. So I did another deal 1 year later, and then a year after that, I tried to do another one, but I just lost my deposit because I signed a contract, I put 4,000 earnest money, and then the seller said, "You're not entering the apartment. You have a contract to buy it. It's assignable, but the contract doesn't say you can do showings." And so I did a couple other deals where I bought with sort of like creative financing. I guess a lease option is what you would call it. I did a couple deals like that, but really I got some traction where in 2015 I partnered up with someone who had a construction company, and they had cash and I had free time and energy. And so we handed out over 1 million flyers. We started flipping houses in Belgium, and we did about 2-3 dozen houses in Belgium.
Wow.
We made over, there was a lot of dead inventory that had been sitting there for decades, I guess, or years at least. And, we got some amazing deals. But then after we did those deals, the government came back to us and they were like, "You bought this one too cheap. You bought that one too cheap. We fine you 10,000 here, 20,000 here." So we made good money. We made over a million euro in 18 months.
But the government wanted to dictate what you were doing. They wanted their fingers in what you were doing. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And then in 2016, I went to Florida. I essentially gave notice from my apartment. I went to Florida, and that's when I got started.
Now, why did you want the freedom that America provided with investing? Is that why you left?
Well, I mean, I always read all those books about US real estate, and I was like,
Yeah.
isn't it easier to just do it there and not be bothered by the government? And also, you have to understand, like in Belgium, a closing takes at least 3 months. So even like one example, we found a house one time for 70,000, and we sold it to the neighbor the day after the closing for 178,000. But you would be, that's awesome, right? That's an amazing deal. Well, maybe not, because first of all, you pay 60% tax on the profit, you pay transfer tax, and then it takes 6 months to do the deal, which is 6 months you have the money tied up. So it was just not interesting. Even when you're successful in Belgium with those things, and most of Europe that's the case, it's just not that interesting because high taxes takes long to close, and then the government is in your business all the time. So America was just for me always the dream. Like United States is just the only country where you still have real capitalism in real estate. So
yeah, I like to think about it like this way, Dimitri. America, while we have our own problems, right? It is probably the last place in the world where you can ethically, morally make your fortune, because in most other countries, unless you're in bed with the government and there's some corruption going on, the government is going to limit what you do, how you do it. They're going to have their fingers in.
Yeah.
And if you're a high income earner, you're going to be paying way more than 50% in taxes in almost every European country.
Yeah.
So,
let me tell you a quick story to give you some insight about how that works here. So in 2010, 2011, I was tutoring mathematics, and I actually showed up at someone's house, and I was like, "Wow, they live nice." I was like, "What's your dad doing?" And she's like, "My dad does a little bit of real estate." Well, a couple weeks later, the mom says, our dad was really happy when he took the company public. And I was like, public? And so apparently they were billionaires. And I was like, wow, that's awesome, man. I want to do that too. And then I learned they were doing it for generations. And then she said, well, next week we have a party and all the top politicians are coming. And then a couple months after that, he got a tax exemption where he paid no more income tax on his company.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, so that's how it really goes here. Like you're not,
well, and
you're not
money
going to
was
go in. Yeah.
money was changing hands with those government officials and all of that. I mean,
Yeah,
that's the game that's played there. And so I feel so fortunate that we can do that in America still, and you can do it
for sure.
honestly, morally, and ethically. You don't have
A
to
hundred
have any
percent.
kind of corruption going on to do what we do, you know.
No, no, no. Yeah, for
But
sure.
Dimitri, that's really amazing. I mean, it's so encouraging to hear that you live in Europe. You're a
Hmm.
native Belgium-born citizen, but you're
Right?
virtually doing deals from there in Florida and
Correct.
and making that successfully work. I mean, to me, it sort of like removes all the excuses. And I've seen you in the comments, sort of like you don't
Hmm.
seem like you're really tolerant when you hear. I sort of imagine you when you hear Americans complaining about something that's hard. And I'm like, you have no idea.
Hmm.
Like you have no context to what the rest of the world goes through. I lived in Argentina for 2 years. I've lived in Puerto Rico. Like I've seen outside of what just our little
Yeah,
bubble of America. I mean, the
yeah,
poverty in
for sure.
America is still the top 1% in the world. You know what I mean? Like we just have
A
no
hundred percent.
concept of what other countries have to do.
Yeah, for sure. And you've been to Netherlands, so you know these are not poor countries. It's just
Hmm.
very difficult to get out of the middle class in those countries. So
Yeah.
the whole system is wired for you to be a middle class, good tax-paying citizen. It's not meant for you to become like someone who
Mhm.
shoots up and we
Yeah.
have even an expression about it where it says something like cutting off the heads that stick above the average or something like that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
you know,
preferable.
America is a country that encourages people to really do big things, and that's awesome.
Hmm.
That's great
Yeah.
about your culture.
Yeah, that's great. So, okay. So you move to America, you pick Florida as your market, and you start doing deals in Florida. Now, what I want to do,
Yeah,
Dimitri, is I want to break down a deal that you did recently.
sure.
And what's exciting about this
Yeah.
deal is you use Propwire, which is the software that I created. It's a free software. You can search and
Hmm.
download as much data as you want. And you use the free tools in Propwire and the free data in
Yeah.
Propwire to do a
Yeah.
really cool land deal. And so
Yeah.
let's break this deal down. It was two adjacent lots, and I'd love to hear the story. Tell us, first of
Hmm.
all, how you set up your searches to find that deal, and then walk us through that
Yeah.
process of getting a hold of the seller and so on. So how'd that go?
Okay. So first of all, I normally get my data straight from the county. The problem with that is there's many counties, and I was looking at bigger deals. So I was like, I need some software or something where I can just look statewide. And so what I did is I went to Propwire, and in the search tools, I put like a minimum value for the properties because I wanted to eliminate all the 20, 30, $50,000
Mm.
lots. I've done a lot of those. I've done hundreds of those, but I'm more at the point where I just want to focus on six-figure deals. And so I put a minimum value. I believe it was 150 or $200,000
Mhm.
as a minimum value. I put vacant land. I put a minimum time of ownership, which I believe was, I put it pretty long, like a decade or something.
Yeah.
And
And
I,
explain that. Why
yeah.
why why do you want to target landowners who have owned the lot for 7 or 10 years or whatever? Why?
Well, because okay, first of all, that means they have a lot of capital appreciation, so they might have bought it at 50 and now it's worth maybe
Hmm.
200 or something. Second reason is because very often people buy land, they have the plan to build a house and then it never
Hmm.
happens because they're suddenly, we all do this to some extent, right? We dream about something and then reality sets in like, oh, this is a little bit harder than we thought. And so people will live up in Massachusetts, they have a piece of land in Florida, they've owned it for a while, the value is now higher. They're like, we're not going to build that house, so we might want to sell it. And
And I'll add to
yeah,
this, Dimitri. One thing that's so unique about land, people, especially people who have owned it 7, 10 years, is they're not motivated sellers because they own it free and clear. Maybe they pay a little
right.
bit of taxes, and that's annoying, but it's not really
Hmm.
causing them any hardship, and they're not even motivated to do something about it until you contact them. So you
Yeah,
contact them, and you're like, "Hey, I see you own this piece of land for 10 years. Are you interested in selling?" And they're sort of like, "Well, I guess, I never did
yeah,
anything with it. What's
right.
your make me an offer?" And you start doing price, and they're like, "Well, shoot, that's double what I bought it for 10 years ago. Okay, let's do
Yeah,
it." It's
right,
sort of like
right.
an
Yeah, yeah.
afterthought.
Absolutely. The other thing is this deal had a little bit more hair on it than someone who just bought it and wanted to sell it because the owners actually, when I skip traced it, I used Bean Verify to manually skip traces, and I saw that the people on record they passed away. So I just started calling all the family members, the neighbors. I just call everyone that I can get a hold of, and they said they wanted to sell it. One of the family members said they wanted to sell it. They had been under contract with a certain very big company, which rhymes to your last name, and they'd been under contract with them for 2 years, and it fell through. And they already opened the probate, and I told them, what if I pay for the probate? I'll pay for the back taxes, I'll pay the closing cost, and we'll write up a contract where you get 180,000 net at closing, and then I'll take care of everything. I knew the probate was going to take 6 to 10 weeks in Lee County. So what I did is I wrote in a contract that I'm allowed to market the agreement to third parties. I got a real estate agent. He went out there, took pictures, he listed it, and
On the MLS.
Yeah, and then and on the MLS, and then after 2 to 3 weeks, we sold it for 327, and then after the inspection period, they traded me down to 307, which I ended up accepting. I mean, they tried like 280 or something, but we settled somewhere in the middle at 307, and that's it. Probate was done.
But then you had to wait like 8 weeks or something like that, right, to close?
Yeah, it was 6 more weeks to close.
Okay.
And I pressured the probate attorney. So every 2 or 3 days, I sent her and her assistant an email. So, hey, where are we with this file? And they were so annoyed with me. But it's good because it pushes them to get it done quickly.
What I love, Dimitri, that you did here was, even though you agreed to pay all those fees, you structured it with everybody as vendors that got paid at closing out of the proceeds on the HUD statement.
Yeah, I put zero down. I didn't even put earnest money down, which in hindsight, you might say it's a mistake, but according to the title company, they're good with it because I always write in my contract that earnest money is due after the inspection period. And then what I do is I either assign or sign a new contract for a double close. This was actually a double close. And the earnest money from the end buyer is much higher, and it covers my earnest money because it releases towards my earnest money. So that way I have zero down. So I didn't put a dime, not even $1. And the entire deal cost me like literally nothing because I used Propwire. I used my phone. I guess you could count $2 there or something, but it's and the power you get from that is awesome because I'm like, you can drop me somewhere in Asia homeless, like give me a phone and a laptop and I'll buy and sell something.
You'll do deals. So there's some stuff I want to unpack here, but let's go back to your list because you did a minimum value, which Propwire will let you choose a minimum value. So guys, this is where when you go into Propwire, you go over to the More tab and it'll give you additional filters that you can put in. So what Dimitri did is he said, okay, I want to eliminate all the low dollar stuff. Let's get rid of all of that. Let's pick higher dollar land. So then he did that. He went to the owners and he said, I want a minimum years owned. Now, did you pick whether it was owner occupied or investor owned? Did you pick that filter?
No,
Okay. One filter that you may want to play with, Dimitri, is what some people do that like land is they'll exclude investor owned lots and they'll just go after owned by the private owner. All that means is they didn't take title in an entity, they took title personally. And the thought process around that is, well, if it was a business, an LLC or something that bought it, they've probably got plans for it. They're probably a builder or flipper or something, an investor. I want to go after somebody that just bought some piece of land as like recreational.
Yeah.
I think when you occupied that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think when you said owner occupied, you meant corporate owned. Is that possible?
That's what I mean. Sorry, corporate entity owned.
Yeah.
You don't have to put that filter in there, but it's one more if you want to get a little bit more specific. True. And then I like too how the other thing you can do on there is, what was the other one? Well, I think what I was going to say is maybe you look at this feature, but when you get that list, it's going to be a little smaller, obviously, is when you click on the individual records, you can go to the owner tab and it will tell you what else they own. And I love that feature because it'll tell you, do they own one piece of land? Do they own 100 properties? Like, and that gives you some, it tells you a little bit more insight into who you're dealing with.
Well, that one I did not know. So thanks for mentioning that. I really did not know that.
Yeah, it's really cool. I love that feature that you can do. Just click on the owner tab and it'll tell you what, it'll even give you a list of what else they own. And the reason why that's helpful, Dimitri, is when you call them, like when you skip trace and call them, you sort of know what else they're doing. And you could even say, hey, do you got something else you're looking to sell? You know, I see you own a couple more vacant lots. Do you want to sell those too? You know, I mean, you can always ask that, but it's kind of nice to know it when you go in.
Yeah, for sure. I know it sounds weird, but I try to go after like distressed stuff. And I always do like at least 15, 20 minutes research before even reaching out to people, because people can sense when you don't know anything about the property, if you don't know the owners are dead, and people don't respect you if you don't know anything. So,
That's a good
and
tip.
if you do, they actually do respect you. But then the other side of the coin with that is you cannot do big lists, so you have to go after very distressed stuff when you're doing that. And I believe one of the other filters I had was either owner deceased or it was tax delinquent or both. But I know you can do those things on
Yep.
Propwire. So yeah.
Yeah, what's great about Propwire is you can do what we call list stacking. So then all that means is you can add multiple layers of filter. And then what that does is it's going to give you a much smaller condensed list, but it's going to
Yeah,
be a highly impactful list because they're hitting all these motivation types, like out of state
100%.
owner and all these other things. So, and then what happens then is once you get that narrowed down to, let's say, like 50 and it's in your core
Hmm.
market, well, that's nothing to skip trace and it's nothing to personally call that list because it's small. The list
Right.
where you want to outsource to a cold callers when it's 1,000, 5,000, 10,000, like send that to a cold caller, let them do the calling, right? But not these
Hmm.
really small niche lists. Those ones you can do yourself, which is kind of cool.
Yep.
So let's unpack. I want to unpack a little bit your structure because you went over it,
Okay.
and for anybody listening that didn't catch that,
Yeah.
what
Yeah, it
Dimitri
went
did
quick.
here is he structured a double close. And then what he did was on his initial contract with the seller, he put on there earnest money due at the end of inspection. And all that did was it bought him a window of time. Now, he's still saying that I'm willing and going to pay earnest money, but because it's after his inspection, and let's just say your inspection's 10 days or whatever it is, you can get away with longer inspections on land because you can tell the seller, look, I need to call zoning, I need to do some due diligence about what I can and can't do with this land. And that might take a minute. So I usually can get 14-day, 21-day, 30-day clauses or inspection contingencies. But then because he's double closing, when he went and found his new buyer, that's now the BC purchase and sale agreement. He required non-refundable earnest money from the buyer, right? His cash buyer. And then when all of that goes to title will look at that earnest money and count it towards his earnest money. So he basically used his buyer's earnest money to meet the obligation of his earnest money. So therefore, he had zero of his own money, not even earnest money, nothing into the deal, right? Like,
Yep.
did I hit on that good, Dimitri?
Yeah, correct. And if anyone wants to look up the property, it's on Sophomore Lane. I don't know the exact number, but it's a very short street with only 4 houses. It's in Lee County in Fort Myers. Sophomore Lane, it's at the beginning of the street. It was actually two lots. One was like just a regular shape. The other one was like a U shape surrounding it. Apparently on the U shape, there was a house, which I didn't know, but it was also not important. It was like a tear down. So I learned that after the closing when the buyer called me about he asked something about the house. I was like, what house? But it was also not important because the agent, he made pictures of the land, and that's what it was all about. So it was a
Yeah.
big piece of land, and that's where all the value was.
The other thing I love about what you did is rather than go manually try to find a buyer, which you can certainly do. I mean, that's how we do it all the time. You got a clause in your contract with the seller which said, I have the right to market this contract to a third party publicly, right? That's a clause. We call it a pre-marketing clause. I have those in my contracts too. And that then gave you the right to go out and market the property. So then you hired a real estate agent, put the thing on the MLS, and then you let the buyers come to you. You don't have to go find them. They come to you now because you're actively listed on the MLS. And do you know what was that buyer's intent? What were they, builders, or what were they doing?
Well, so the company that rhymes to your last name, their intent was to buy the neighbor's property and then the one next to that one. And not the neighbor, but the one next to that one was actually also owned by the same family. And so the person who bought my property, I mean the deal I did, they went to the family and they bought the one at the end of the street as well, which was a big mistake because I could buy that one as well. And I was like, no, let me first do this one, prove to them that I'm a good buyer, which is it's always a mistake, right? You should
Mm-hmm.
always just go for it. I probably left 50 or 100,000 on the table there, but he bought that one at the end of the street as well. And so I'm guessing because he was a professional, they were not like looking to build their personal home there. I'm guessing they're just going to wait until they can pick up the house in the middle. And then it's
Mm,
probably something where you can do a development or something because now
yeah.
we're talking like 20 acres or something like that. So,
Wow. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
So when that came up on the MLS, that must have just been like perfect timing. Like, oh my gosh,
yeah,
here's this property we already are trying to do deals over in this little street, and so here we go.
yeah,
So probably a motivated buyer, and they ready to
sure.
go.
Yeah.
So So that's what's cool, guys,
Yep.
about I say this all the time. Like, if you can ever get your deal on the MLS, either take it down and buy it, put it on the MLS, get a pre-marketing clause, put it on the MLS, you're usually gonna find the highest paying buyer in the market because you're gonna get the most eyeballs on your deal. And you're
Yeah.
always looking for the outlier. And so Dimitri found the outlier. It's this person who already has a vested interest in that street. And so they were the very best buyer. Dimitri maybe would have never found them had he not put it on the MLS. I mean, chances are it would have been, you probably wouldn't have found that buyer.
I wouldn't have. And you know, you can easily deceive yourself because even the deals where I just assigned it to a cash buyer and I made $50,000 on a piece of land, if I would have put it on the MLS, I'm sure I would have made over six figures on it. So you can be like, yeah, some assignments are good, yeah, but they would have been much better if you would have sold them at retail. So,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
yeah.
So Bill, is this the that picture you put in the comment? Is that the lot Dimitri's talking about? Is that the street?
Yeah, that's, remember the guys at the three guys that, what are they, 19, 20 years old and made almost.
Oh yeah.
Well, that's the two lots that they sold.
Oh, got it. Got it. Yeah. Very cool. Good. So Dimitri, that's really awesome. So you made a net profit of right around $100,000 on that deal.
It was right below 100,000. Yeah, I bought at 180, sold at 307, and then I paid a probate attorney about 4 grand, a few thousand in property taxes, and then about 15 to the real estate agent. So it was almost
Yeah.
100,000 on that deal. Yeah, and
So I'm just
yeah,
this is so cool. I mean, think about this, guys. Free software found the deal, got the buyer to fund earnest money, agreed to pay all these fees, but got those vendors to get paid on the closing statement at closing from the proceeds. Dimitri made $100,000 from Belgium on flipping lots with zero out of pocket, not a dime into the deal. I mean, is there anything
Yeah.
more beautiful than that? I mean, what
It's-
an amazing deal.
Yeah, the funny thing is I do a lot of my deals like that because I feel it also mitigates risk. So some people would tell me, if you have the money, just pay cash for it and list it. But then I'm like, yeah, but then if there's something wrong that I haven't seen, now I also assume risk and you also tie up capital. So I like to do my deals a lot of times like that because you're not just not using your money, but which means it can work somewhere else, but you're also mitigating risk. And then, of course, you want to have backup money in case that, you know, there's a reason why you want to close
Yeah.
on it, so you can just buy it. But yeah, it was an awesome deal for sure.
Yeah, guys,
Yeah.
leave a comment and say, Dimitri, you're a flipping genius. I love what Mauricio said. No excuses. I mean, how can anyone have an excuse? Next time someone gives me an excuse, I'm going to say, let me tell you about Dimitri. Like, there are no excuses, guys. Like, put in, and you
Well-
put in the work. I mean, I know you do. You put in the
Yeah.
work.
Yeah, you
So-
have to work very hard. But, you know, I also want to say, like, it's not like I did something that's special. Sure, it takes some thinking about how you structure things, but probably most people who watch this can do it. I mean, if not everyone can just do it. Like the point where people would fall out is not whether they're capable of doing. The point where people fall out is saying, I called 3 days in a row and everyone told me to F off. That's where people fall out. But if you stay consistent at it and if you keep doing it, your success rate is 100%. Like you're guaranteed to succeed.
Yeah.
So
I think you're right.
People-
I think people quit because of discouragement and rejection, not because it's not something that you can't figure out how to do. It's, you know,
Yeah.
the math we do is like third grade math, you know,
Yeah,
it's,
for
it's
sure.
not
Well,
complicated.
I did a master in mathematical engineering, and one time I went through like a real estate book, and there was a chapter mathematics for real estate agents, and I was like, that's not mathematics, but that's also good news because it means it's very accessible for everyone, right? If you would have to get a master's degree in math, it would kind of not be a very good business. But yeah, it's good news because anyone who has the willingness to work at it, it's not your intelligence, it's just your willingness to do it and to just keep pushing and keep going at it and not give up and think about why you're doing all of this, you know, and you'll succeed.
Yeah, that's great advice. I love that. Thank you, Dimitri. You know what? It was fun to finally connect with you, Dimitri. I've seen you around for a while, and so it's great to
Yeah.
finally meet you and hear your story. And thank you for sharing your deal and bringing value to everybody.
Yeah, for sure. It's nice to connect for me too. It gets sometimes in terms of the real estate, it gets lonely here because there's no one, like even if people ask me what I do, I sort of don't tell them US real estate because they don't understand it. So I tell them I do some marketing, you know, and so, which is true, right? Most of our business is marketing, but I always appreciate to connect with people in the business. So
Yeah, that's great. All right. Well, thank you again, everybody. Appreciate you guys for joining on the call here, and we'll talk again soon. Have a good week, you guys.